I'm 73, and I know how to count money. All my life, I've learned to distinguish between the rustle of real bills and the empty clink of promises. It's funny, but now, when my world is falling apart, it's the only thing that hasn't been taken away from me. I sit in a chair by the window, watching the October wind tear the last leaves off the maple tree in the yard. The hospital room seems too spacious for the frail figure of my Veronica, who is melting away with each passing day. Her hair, once dark and thick, now sparse and white, is scattered on the pillow. 48 years together, and I still see her as the girl who once smiled at me at a dance in Great Falls in 1976. Did you bring the papers again, Abbott? Her voice is weak, but I can still hear the characteristic sneer I love so much. Just the contract with Birch's lab, I answered, trying to keep my voice light. Nothing urgent. Liar, she smiles slightly and the wrinkles around her eyes deepen. Let me see it. I reluctantly hand her the folder. Veronica's hands shake, but her eyes still scan the lines of the contract carefully. She's always been my best financial advisor, even though she's never officially held a position at Fielding Laboratories Furnishings. But it was Veronica who 40 years ago convinced me to invest all our savings in specialized laboratory furniture when everyone around us thought it was crazy. We can't accept these terms, she shakes her head, handing back the documents. Deferring payment for 90 days? That would kill our cash flow. I know, darling, but we don't have a choice. Birch is our biggest client right now. What about the loan? Did you talk to Patterson? The bank said no. I sigh, remembering the cold eyes of our former friend Alan Patterson, who used to come to our barbecues and now barely nods when we meet. They're offering a restructuring with an increase in interest. Veronica closes her eyes and I can see the pain distorting her face. I don't know if it's from being sick or thinking about the company. Probably both. Even now, confined to a hospital bed, she's thinking about the future of the business we've raised like our own child. Has Terrence been here? She asks after a pause. The question I hate the most. No, he's busy. Sherilyn sent flowers. Even now I'm defending our son to her, even though I'm seething with rage inside. Terrence, our only child, heir to everything we've built, hasn't shown up at the hospital in 2 weeks. His wife Sherilyn has called twice, each time with new reasons why they can't come from the Great Falls suburb where they live in the house we gave them for their wedding 10 years ago. Don't make excuses for him, Abbott. Veronica opens her eyes, and in them I see the same bitterness that's eating me up inside. He's always been like that. Remember when he demanded a new bike and crashed it a week later? I do, like thousands of other times when our son showed his true character. Spoiled by our love and money, Terrence grew up believing that the world owed him everything and he owed nothing. He'll change, I say words I haven't believed in a long time. Veronica shakes her head weakly and closes her eyes again. We both know the truth. Our son is a grown man of 37, spoiled and selfish, with exorbitant ambition and minimal ability. Terrence has spent the last few years working for the company in a position I created specifically for him, Director of Strategic Development. It sounds grandiose, but in reality his contribution was limited to rare appearances in the office and grandiose ideas that never turned a profit. But the paycheck was coming in handy. The door to the room opens and a nurse enters with a tray of medication. I put my papers away and stand up to make room for her. While she checks the IV and changes the fluid bags, I look out the window at the hospital parking lot. Among the cars, I spot Terrence's silver Lexus. Did he really deign to come? I feel conflicted inside. Happy for Veronica, who's looking forward to his visit, and angry at my son, who shows up only occasionally as if doing me a favor. Mr. Fielding, the nurse interrupts my thoughts. Dr. Howell would like to speak with you. He's waiting for you in his office. I nod, take one last look at a slumbering Veronica, and leave. I run into Terrence and Sherilyn in the hallway. My son, tall and trim, with my blue eyes and Veronica's strong-willed chin, nods awkwardly. Sherilyn, his wife, smiles coldly, showing off her perfect teeth. Her red hair is arranged in an elaborate style, and the necklace I'd given Veronica for their 30th wedding anniversary glistens around her neck. Terrence gave it to Sherilyn after Veronica's first hospitalization. How is she? My son asks, not looking me in the eye. Fading, I answer briefly. The doctor's waiting for me. She'll be glad to see you. I walk past, feeling Sherilyn's gaze on my back. I've always known she sees me as an obstacle between her husband and the company. To her, I'm not Terrence's father, just an old man clinging to power and money. In his office, Dr. Howell speaks at length about Veronica's condition, using medical terms and delicate euphemisms. But the bottom line is simple. She has a few days left, maybe a week. Pancreatic cancer doesn't stand a chance. We can increase the dose of painkillers, he says, but that means she'll be less present. She'd like to stay conscious, I reply, knowing my Veronica, even if it means more pain. The doctor nods understandingly and holds out a new treatment bill to me. I glimpse at the amount, another $32,000. Money the company can barely spare right now. The last 6 months of Veronica's treatment has drained not only her body, but also the finances of the business. I never told her how much we were spending on experimental methods and expensive drugs. She wouldn't have allowed it. Always practical, my Veronica would have said that this money was needed more than the company, our legacy. I go back to the room and find Sherilyn there. She's sitting in my chair, holding Veronica's hand. No sign of Terrence. He went to get coffee, Sherilyn explains, as if reading my question. Veronica looks more animated, and there's even a faint blush on her cheeks. She always reacts that way to Terrence's visits, brief bursts of energy, followed by more fatigue. Abbott, she holds out her hand to me. Sherilyn came up with a great idea for a new product line. Really? I sit down on the edge of the bed, holding back my skepticism. Eco-friendly lab furniture, Sherilyn announces enthusiastically. It's so popular right now. Everyone's talking about sustainability and carbon footprints. Sounds interesting, I replied diplomatically, though I'm getting irritated inside. Are they talking about business ideas with Veronica dying? I thought we could launch a new line as early as next quarter, Sherilyn continues. Terrence could take the lead on the project. Sure, it all comes down to giving Terrence more control of the company. But I just nod, not wanting to upset Veronica by arguing. We need to do some market research, Veronica says, and for a moment she's back to being the businesswoman who was my partner in everything. I don't think labs are willing to pay more for being environmentally friendly. Sherilyn frowns slightly, clearly not expecting the criticism. At that moment, Terrence returns with 2 cups of coffee. Neither one is for me. What's this conversation about? He asks, handing 1 cup to Sherilyn. About your idea for eco-friendly furniture, Sherilyn replies, and I note how quickly the project has become his idea. Oh yeah, Terrence nods, as if he's actually come up with it. Mom, you should have seen the presentation I gave to the board of directors. What presentation? I ask, hearing it for the first time. The one I showed you last week, Terrence answers with a hint of irritation. You said you'd think about it. That's a lie. He didn't show me any presentation, but I don't want to make a scene in front of Veronica. Of course we'll discuss it in the office, I say, and Terrence throws me a look of latent anger. Veronica watches us, and I can see the understanding in her eyes. She's always seen right through Terrence, even when I've tried to turn a blind eye to his flaws. Abbott, she says quietly, show Terrence the latest financial statements. He needs to know what he'll be facing when... She doesn't finish the sentence. Of course, darling, I promise, though I'm sure Terrence won't even look at the numbers. He's never shown any interest in the financial side of the business, preferring loud statements and ostentatious activity. Sherilyn glances at her watch, and I realize their visit is coming to an end. Typical. Arrive for 15 minutes and then rush off on their important business. Veronica notices it too. You have to go, I realize, she says with a slight sadness in her voice. Thanks for stopping by. Sherilyn leans over to kiss Veronica on the cheek, and Terrence squeezes her hand awkwardly. They promise to come back tomorrow, even though we all know that's not going to happen. I walk them to the door. Call me if there's any change, Terrence says, already pulling out the car keys. I will, I say, knowing that even if I do, he'll find a reason not to come. When they leave, I turn back to Veronica. She's lying there with her eyes closed, but I can see a tear rolling down her cheek. He's never going to change, is he? She asks without opening her eyes. No, I answer honestly, recognizing the obvious for the first time. He won't. The company's in trouble, Abbott. I know you're hiding the real numbers from me. We'll get through this, I say, even though I don't believe what I'm saying. Don't let Terrence destroy what we've built, she says, her voice firm despite her weakness. He doesn't understand the value of things. He never has. I squeeze her hand, feeling the brittle bones beneath the paper skin. What can I say? That the company is already in debt? That the banks are denying loans? That the last experimental therapy cost us a contract with 3 clients because we couldn't fulfill the order on time? That I don't know how to get out of the financial hole we're sinking into? I won't let you, I promise, and in that moment I really mean it. Veronica smiles weakly and closes her eyes again. I sit next to her, holding her hand until she falls asleep. Then I pull out the paperwork and start working right here in the hospital room, as I've been doing for the past few months. The numbers in the reports don't add up, no matter how much I try to rearrange them. The company is sinking, and I'm not sure I can salvage the legacy Veronica and I have spent a lifetime building. And yet Terrence and Sherilyn are already circling it like vultures, ready to tear apart what's left. I can see it in their eyes, hear it in their conversations. They're waiting for me to break, for me to let go. And with every day, every hour spent in this hospital room, I feel my strength leaving me, losing my grip. Without Veronica, I'm not sure I have the will left to resist. It's been raining for the 3rd day. The gray streams have turned the cemetery into a swamp, and the black umbrellas of those gathered into a single mournful blur. I stand by a fresh grave, clutching a red rose in my hand, a last gift for Veronica. She died quietly in her sleep. I held her hand all night, feeling the life leave her body. By morning, her hand was cold. Even then, I didn't let go until the nurse took me aside. I didn't cry. I couldn't. There was an emptiness inside that sucked out all feelings, all thoughts. The priest says something about eternal life, about meeting in paradise. I don't listen. I look at the coffin decorated with white lilies, Veronica's favorite flowers. In it lies half of my soul, my support, my compass. 48 years together, almost half a century, and now here I am, alone, on the edge of the abyss. Terrence stands nearby, supporting a crying Sherilyn. She sobs loudly, holding a lace handkerchief to her face. It all looks picturesque, like a shot from a movie. My son maintains a serious expression, but there is no grief or pain in his eyes. He's here out of propriety because it's the right thing to do, because people are watching. I lower the rose onto the coffin lid. It slips on the wet varnish and falls into the dirt. I want to bend down, pick it up, wipe it off, but my body won't listen. Terrence steps forward, puts his hand on my shoulder, a gesture for the audience. I feel his palm tense, as if he's uncomfortable touching me. "Hang in there, Dad," he says loud enough for those standing nearby to hear. "Mom wouldn't want you to give up." I nod, unable to utter a word. He's right about one thing. Veronica wouldn't want to see me broken. But she's not here. She's nowhere. After the ceremony, everyone goes to our house. Or rather, my house now. Lonely, empty, meaningless. In the living room, where Veronica hung Christmas decorations every December, there are now people standing around with glasses and quiet voices discussing the weather, politics, anything but death. Death is an uncomfortable topic. It's avoided like a puddle on the sidewalk. I sit in a chair, accept condolences, mechanically thank for the warm words. There's nothing inside but the echo of my heartbeat, which somehow keeps beating. Mr. Fielding, Patrick Wallace, the CTO of our company, stands in front of me. "Please accept my deepest condolences. Veronica was, an exceptional woman." "Thank you, Patrick," I reply automatically. "Don't worry about the company, sir. We'll be fine. You just need time." I nod, even though I know the company can't do it without me. Not now that we're on the verge of bankruptcy. But Patrick and the other employees don't know the reality of the situation. Only Veronica and I knew the truth. And now it's just me. In the far corner of the living room, I notice Terrence talking quietly with Ben Pryor, our lawyer. They stand too close together, their heads almost touching. The look on Terrence's face is serious, businesslike, not the face of a grieving son on the day of his mother's funeral. Ben is writing something down in a small notebook, nodding occasionally. It's strange. What could they possibly have in common? Ben's been with the company since its inception. He's my lawyer, not Terrence's. I take a closer look. Terrence notices my gaze, says something to Ben, and they go their separate ways. Caution breaks through the numbness of grief, but I'm too exhausted to think about it now. Sherilyn approaches with a glass of water. "You should drink, Abbott," she says with feigned concern. "You haven't eaten anything all day." "I'm not hungry," I reply briefly. "I understand." She sits down beside me and puts her hand on my knee, a gesture that seems inappropriately intimate. "But you must take care of yourself. Veronica would want you to. It's always that damn Veronica would want it. Like they know what my wife would want. Like they care." Terrence and I were thinking, Sherilyn continued, her voice lowering to a whisper. "Maybe you should take a long vacation. Get some rest, recuperate. The company's not going anywhere. Terrence is ready to take over for that time. That's it. The real purpose of her concern." "The company's in a tough spot, Sherilyn," I say, looking her straight in the eye. "It's not a good time for a vacation." "That's exactly why you need a vacation," she doesn't give up. "You're exhausted, Abbott. After all those months in the hospital, Terrence can handle it. He's learned a lot from you." "He's learned a lot. My son hasn't been in the office more than once a week in years. His idea of business is limited to fancy presentations and long lunches with clients on the company dime. He has no idea where we're at, and I'm not sure he could handle it even if he knew the truth." "Thank you for your concern, but I'm fine," I reply firmly. "Work will get me through this time." Sherilyn purses her lips but quickly puts a sympathetic expression back on her face. "Of course, Abbott. Whatever you say. We just want to help." She leaves and I'm alone in the chair, watching the people who are slowly leaving the house. Some come up to say goodbye, others just wave from afar. At one point, I catch a glimpse of Maria Cortez, our chief accountant. She looks at me strangely, as if she wants to say something, but doesn't dare. When our eyes meet, she quickly turns away and hurries out. This is not like Maria, who is usually straightforward and open. By evening, the house is empty. Terrence and Sherilyn are the only ones left, ordering food from the delivery service, putting away the dishes, giving the appearance of helping out. "We'll spend the night here," Terrence says without asking my opinion. "You shouldn't be alone the first night." I want to object, to say I want to be alone, but I don't have the energy to argue. They settle into Terrence's former room, turned into a guest bedroom after he moved in. I can't sleep at night. I lie staring at the ceiling, feeling the emptiness next to me, where Veronica used to sleep. I hear Terrence and Sherilyn whispering in the next room. Their voices rise and fall back to whispers. You can't make out the words, but the tone is tense, businesslike. They are not consoling each other in grief. They are discussing something, arguing. The day of the funeral. In the morning, Terrence announces he's going to the office. "Someone has to check on things," he says, tying his tie in front of the hallway mirror. "You'd better stay home tonight." "I'll go with you," I object, rising from the chair where I've spent most of the night. "Dad, you don't have to," Terrence frowns. "Everyone will understand if you take a few days." "I'm going," I repeat firmly. "The company needs me now." For a moment, irritation flashes in his son's eyes, but he quickly masks it with a smile. "Whatever you say. Shall we take my car?" In the office, I'm met with sympathetic looks and awkward pauses. The employees don't know what to say, how to behave. The death of a boss is not a situation for which there is a protocol. I walk past them, nod in response to their condolences, and lock myself in my office. I sit down at my desk, turn on my computer. The screen flashes, numbers, graphs, tables, the language of business which I understand. I need to check the latest payments, contact the bank, find out the status of the credit line, but my hands don't obey. In front of me is Veronica's face when she opened her eyes for the last time and looked at me. At that moment, she knew she was leaving. I knew it too. A knock on the door interrupts the flow of memories. Maria Cortez, our chief accountant, enters with a folder of papers. "Mr. Fielding," her voice sounds strained, "I need to talk to you." "Of course, Maria. Have a seat." She sits down across from me, nervously rubbing the corner of the folder. Maria has been with us for almost 20 years. She knows everything about the company's finances. And right now, she's clearly disturbed. "Terrence has requested access to the financial statements," she says, looking not at me, but somewhere over my shoulder. "All of them, including the confidential ones." When? Yesterday. And a week ago, while you were, she stammered, at the hospital with Mrs. Fielding. So, while I was at Veronica's bedside, my son was going through the company finances. I wonder what exactly he was looking for. And what did he find? Did you give him access? I asked, trying to keep my voice neutral. Not everything. Maria shakes her head. I told him that some of the documents required your authorization. He wasn't happy. You did the right thing, Maria. Thank you for the information. She nods, but she won't leave. Clearly has something else she wants to say. Is there something else? Yes, Mr. Fielding. Terrence met with Ben Pryor and Alan Patterson from the bank. Several times. I saw them at the restaurant across from the office. They seemed very engaged in conversation. Ben Pryor is our lawyer. Alan Patterson is the banker who recently denied us a loan. Both have a direct bearing on the financial position of the company, and both are meeting with my son behind my back. I understand, I say, even though I don't really understand anything. Thank you for telling me. Maria nods and rises, but stops at the door. Mr. Fielding, I'm very sorry about Mrs. Fielding. She was a wonderful woman. Yes, Maria, she was. As the door closes behind her, I lean back in my chair and close my eyes. What's Terrence up to? Why these secret meetings? The request for financial records? Does he really expect to take control of the company while I'm in mourning? Or is there something else I'm not seeing? Memory takes me back 25 years. Terrence is 12, just back from summer camp. Veronica and I meet him at the airport, excited to see him. That evening, we discover Veronica's jewelry is missing from the safe. When we asked Terrence, he denied everything, cried, accused us of mistrust. A week later, Veronica found a pawn shop receipt in his room. He pawned her grandmother's necklace to buy a new gaming computer. Or the time in college when he forged my signature on a check to pay for a trip to Mexico with friends. Or the time he borrowed money from the company coffers for Sherilyn's first anniversary present, an expensive bracelet she bragged about at a family dinner. Terrence had always been like that, thought he was entitled to everything we owned. But before it was just petty things, the misbehavior of a spoiled child, and now it's about the company, my life's work. A knock on the door interrupts my musings. Patrick Wallace, CTO, enters. I'm sorry to bother you, Mr. Fielding, he says uncertainly. I just wanted to say we're all here for you. If there's anything I can do to help. Thank you, Patrick, I replied sincerely. Patrick has always been one of the most loyal employees. How's the project for Birch's lab coming along? Patrick looks puzzled. Terrence tells me you've decided to put the project on hold. Because of, circumstances. What? I'm straightening up in my chair. I didn't put anything on hold. Patrick's pale. I'm sorry, I thought, Terrence had a meeting this morning. He said you told us to put the Birch project on hold and focus on a new line of eco-friendly furniture. So that's it. While I sat in my office, grief-stricken, Terrence was busily restructuring the business. The Birch project is our biggest contract to date, the only thing keeping the company afloat. Stopping it would be insane. Or, a deliberate attempt to worsen the company's financial situation? Patrick, I say, trying to keep my voice calm, the Birch project remains a priority. I didn't give the order to suspend it. Please let the team know it's still a work in progress. Yes, sir, Patrick nods, but I can see the confusion in his eyes. He doesn't understand what's going on. Neither do I. After he leaves, I sit still, staring into space. Something is happening, something I don't understand, immersed in my grief. Terrence is acting quickly, decisively, not like him, usually so hesitant, waiting for approval. So someone's behind him, guiding him. Sherilyn? Could be. She's always been more ambitious than her husband. I have to be on my guard. I have to protect the company, the only thing I have left. But grief drags me down like an anchor. Every movement, every thought requires effort. I'm exhausted, physically and emotionally, and that's what Terrence seems to be counting on. I turn on my computer, start going through the documents, looking for clues to see what my son is up to. But the numbers blur in front of my eyes, the letters blurring into meaningless blobs. I lean back in my chair, covering my face with my hands. Veronica would know what to do. She'd always known. Don't let Terrence destroy what we've built. Her last words ring in my ears. A promise I made at her deathbed. A promise I can't seem to keep anymore. It's been a week since the funeral. A week that stretched into eternity. Every morning I woke up to an empty bed, reached out to touch Veronica, and stumbled into the cold sheets. Every evening I returned to an empty house, where no one waited for me with dinner. No one asked me how the day had gone. The familiar life that we had built for almost half a century collapsed overnight. I plunged into work, spending 12 to 14 hours at the office. Not because the company needed it, but because I needed to escape from the silence of home, from the ghosts of memories. There was salvation in work. Numbers, contracts, negotiations. Everything clear, everything logical. No emotions, no pain. This morning I noticed a strange buzz in the office. Employees gathered in groups, whispered. At my approach, they changed the topic of conversation abruptly. Something was in the air. Tension, anticipation. It was as if everyone knew a secret except me. Patrick Wallace came into my office at about 10 o'clock in the morning. "Mr. Fielding," his normally confident voice sounded tense. "Do you know about the board meeting at 11 o'clock today?" "What meeting?" I set aside the papers I was reviewing. I hadn't scheduled anything. Patrick shifted from foot to foot, clearly uncomfortable. "It's..." Terrence sent out the notices, said it was urgent. Something about restructuring the company. I got a chill inside. Restructuring? Without my knowledge? The pieces of the puzzle that had been troubling me for the past week began to fit into a picture. Terrence's secret meetings, his sudden interest in the company's finances, the strange behavior of the employees. "Thanks, Patrick," I said, trying to make my voice sound normal. "I'll take care of it." As soon as he left, I dialed the number of Ben Pryor, our lawyer. It took a long time, and finally he answered. "Ben, it's Abbott Fielding. What's going on with the board meeting?" The pause on the other end was too long, too awkward. "Abbott, I thought you knew. Terrence said you'd discussed everything." "We didn't discuss anything." My voice shook with anger. "What the hell is going on in my company?" There was another pause. I could almost see Ben choosing his words, weighing the risks. "Look, Abbott, I can't talk about this over the phone. I'll see you at the meeting at 11. He hung up, leaving me alone with my growing anxiety. What was Terrence up to? And more importantly, how did he manage to organize a board meeting without my knowledge? I'm still the president and majority shareholder of the company. Nothing can happen without my approval. At 11 o'clock, I walked into the conference room. All the board members were already there, 5 people I had personally selected over the years of running the company. Terrence was sitting at the head of the table, in my seat. Next to him was Sherilyn, though she didn't even work for the company. Ben Pryor sat on Terrence's right side, a stack of papers in front of him. When I arrived, the conversation died down, and everyone turned to me. "Ah, Dad," Terrence smiled, but the smile didn't touch his eyes. "It's good you could join us. Soy, what's going on?" I remained standing at the door, not wanting to sit down in the offered chair at the end of the table, as if I were an ordinary employee. "We're having a board meeting," Terrence said calmly, confidently, not his usual nervous, confused self. "We're here to discuss the future of the company. The one I built," I reminded him, "and which I'm still running as far as I know. That's what we're going to talk about." Terrence nodded to Ben, who began handing out some documents. "Recent events have shown that the company needs fresh leadership, new energy, innovation." "Recent events?" I felt the blood rush to my face. "You mean the death of your mother? Or the fact that I'm going through a bereavement?" "Abbott, please," Ben intervened. "No one wants to make this painful. This is about business, not personal relationships." I looked at him, a man I'd considered, if not a friend, a trusted partner for the past 40 years. "What do you call it, Ben? When a son takes advantage of his father's grief to steal the company?" "I have a very specific word for that in my dictionary. Betrayal." There was an awkward silence. The board members averted their eyes, unable to meet my gaze. All except William Thorpe, the youngest member of the board, whom I had invited only 2 years ago. "Mr. Fielding," he began, "I think we should listen to Terrence's proposals. If they're not convincing, we can always vote against them." "You see, Dad?" Terrence spread his hands. "It's all fair and square. Democracy in action." I walked slowly to the table, picked up one of the documents Ben had handed out. Proposal for restructuring and change of FLF leadership. I skimmed through the pages full of legal terminology, but the gist was clear. Terrence was offering himself as the new president of the company with full control over all operations. I was to be given an honorable retirement, retaining the title of founder and a minimal equity stake. "How did you do it, Terrence?" I asked, looking him straight in the eye. "How did you get the board to even consider this ridiculousness?" "They see what I see," he replied with an unpleasant smugness. "The company is stagnant. We're losing customers. We're not growing. We're not innovating. Lab furniture isn't the hottest niche right now, in case you haven't noticed. We need new product lines, new markets, new approaches. And you know which ones, of course." "I didn't ask," I asserted. "I know," he nodded, and I could hear echoes of Sherilyn in his voice. Her ideas, her ambition, passed off as his. "Eco-friendly lab furniture is just the beginning. I have a plan to diversify my business, expand into international markets, launch an online platform for ordering customized lab solutions." Big words, fancy terms, no specifics. Typical Terrence. But the board members listened with interest. Some even nodded. Not because they believed in his plan, but because they were already on his side. I realized that right away. This meeting is not for discussion. It's already decided. "How did you get their support?" I asked quietly for his ears. "What did you promise them?" "Higher dividends. Seats on the board of directors of the subsidiaries will create," Terrence said. "Business, Dad. Nothing personal." "And Ben? Why would he betray me?" "Ben sees the potential of the company under my leadership," Terrence shrugged. "And of course, I offered him more favorable terms of cooperation. Bribed him. My son bribed my own people to steal the company I'd spent a lifetime building. And he chose the moment when I was most vulnerable, right after Veronica's death. Gentlemen," I addressed the board, ignoring Terrence, "I built this company from the ground up. 40 years ago, all I had was a small shop and a big dream. Today, Fielding Laboratories Furnishings is a respected brand in its niche. We've survived 3 economic crises, market changes, competition, and we're still here. Thanks to what? Because of stability, reliability, quality, not innovation for innovation's sake, not fashion trends, but real customer value." I looked around at their faces, trying to find some kind of response. "You've known me for years. You've seen how I work, how I make decisions. You've trusted me to lead the company through good times and bad. And now you're willing to give it all to a man who's been in the office 1 day a week for the last few years? Who doesn't know a single client by name? Who thinks running a business is all about making speeches and signing contracts?" My words hit a void. Their eyes were empty, decisions made. I realized this with piercing clarity. "Let's proceed to the vote," Terrence said, obviously satisfied that the show was over. "On restructuring the company and appointing a new president. All those in favor?" Hands went up one after the other, all except William Thorpe, who sat with his eyes downcast. "William?" Terrence looked up at him with pressure. "Yeah, abstaining," William said quietly. "That doesn't change the result," Ben intervened. "By a majority vote, the motion passes. Terrence Fielding is hereby appointed President and CEO of Fielding Laboratories Furnitures. Abbott Fielding is promoted to Founder Emeritus status with an advisory role and a 5% equity stake." 5%? I couldn't believe my ears. "My own stock? And how are you going to accomplish that?" "The shares are reallocated according to the company's bylaws." Ben avoided looking me in the eye. "In case of mental or physical incapacity of the president." "I am mentally or physically incapacitated." I raised my voice. "The psychologist report says otherwise." Ben pulled out another document. "Dr. Hayes states that you are severely depressed and unable to make sound business decisions at this time." "Dr. Hayes who? I haven't had any psychological evaluation." "He observed you at the funeral," Sherilyn interjected with fake concern in her voice, "and the days afterward. It was necessary, Abbott. For your own good. They were watching me. Hired a psychologist to give an opinion on my incapacity without ever meeting me, without ever talking to me. All the while I was mourning Veronica, they were plotting a coup." "It's illegal," I said to Ben. And you know it. Any court of law would invalidate those documents. Maybe, Ben agreed, but litigation would take months, if not years. In that time, the company could go bankrupt. Is that what you want, Abbott? To destroy what you've built? Blackmail. They were hitting me where it hurts. My love for the company, which was like a second child to Veronica and me. I could have fought, I could have sued, I could have made a public scandal, but the cost would have been the destruction of what we'd spent a lifetime building. I'm the boss now, Daddy, Terrence said, not hiding his triumph. Don't worry, I'll keep the legacy. Just adapting it to modern realities. I looked at him, my son, my own flesh and blood, and I didn't recognize him. When did he become like this? Or was he always like that, and I just didn't want to see it? You think you've won? I said quietly. But you have no idea what you've gotten yourself into. The company's in debt, Terrence. Huge debts. What? His smug smile faltered. We've been teetering on the brink of bankruptcy for the last 3 years. Your mother's treatment cost a fortune. Banks are refusing credit. Suppliers demanding payment in advance. Major clients are late on payments. Now it was my turn to watch their reactions. The board members' faces stretched. They didn't know. Of course they didn't know. Only Veronica and I had that information. You're bluffing, Terrence tried to remain confident, but there was a note of concern in his voice. I've seen the financial statements. You saw what we showed the banks and investors, I grinned bitterly. An embellished version of reality? The real numbers are much worse. He's trying to manipulate us, Sherilyn intervened, putting her hand on her husband's shoulder. Don't listen to him. He just can't accept the loss of control. Maybe you're right, I shrugged. Check it out for yourself. I'd be only too happy to be wrong. I headed for the door, feeling dozens of eyes watching my every move. At the exit, I turned around. I'm leaving, but you don't even know how much debt this company's in. Good luck, new boss. Terrence and Sherilyn exchanged glances and then laughed at the same time, as if I'd told a funny joke. Don't be so dramatic, Dad, Terrence said. We'll do better than you think. Of course we will, Abbott, Sherilyn said. We understand it's hard for you to let go of control, but sometimes you have to trust the younger generation. Their self-confidence was almost touching. They really believed it was that simple, that you could steal a company from its creator and go on with your life, that all the problems were just a figment of my imagination, an attempt to hold on to power. I left the conference room without another word. My secretary caught up with me in the corridor with a box of personal belongings from my office. Even this they had managed to organize. I took the box, nodded my thanks, and headed for the exit. William Thorpe caught up with me at the elevator. Mr. Fielding, I want you to know that I don't support this decision, he said quietly. What they've done is wrong. But you didn't oppose it, I said without rebuke, simply stating the fact. Yeah, I have a family, a mortgage. William lowered his eyes. They threatened to fire me if I voted against it. I nodded understandingly. A young man with commitments, a career ahead of him. Who am I to judge him for cowardice? Haven't I done the same thing myself many times, choosing the safe decision over the right one? Be careful, William, I said as I entered the elevator. They won't stop with me. The elevator doors closed, cutting me off from the world I had created and lost in a single day. I clutched the box of stuff to my chest, feeling the emptiness growing inside. Not just because of the loss of the company, because of the realization that my own son was capable of such betrayal. That all these years when Veronica and I had given him our best, sacrificed for him, he'd seen us as nothing more than an obstacle to his ambitions. I walked out of the building I'd designed 30 years ago and walked to the parking lot without looking back. In the car, I put the box on the passenger seat where Veronica usually sat. He started the engine, but didn't move. I sat looking at the office building, at the windows behind which my son and his minions were probably already celebrating victory. I'll leave, but you don't even know what kind of debt the company's in. Good luck. These words now sounded not like a threat, but a prophecy. Terrence really had no idea what awaited him. He had no idea what difficult decisions Veronica and I had had to make to keep the company afloat all these years. How we juggled loans, deferred payments, personal loans, and now it's all gone to him. along with the proud title of boss. The house had never seemed so empty and quiet. Without Veronica, it was already full of ghosts, and now deprived of even the daily routine of work, it had become a crypt of memories. I wandered from room to room looking at pictures, poring over papers, drinking whiskey straight from the morning, because what did it matter now? The phone was silent. No one was calling. Not coworkers, not former subordinates, not so-called friends. Everyone had made their choices and I wasn't entering their new reality. Only William Thorpe sent a short message. Mr. Fielding, if you need anything, let me know. A small gesture of sympathy that, however, did not translate into real action. On the third day of my forced recluse, I couldn't take it anymore. I had to do something, go somewhere, talk to someone. Otherwise, I could go crazy with endless thoughts about Terrence's betrayal, about the lost company, about Veronica, who would never comfort or support me again. I called Hugh Brightman, my old friend and financial advisor. We'd known each other since college, and although we'd seen each other infrequently in recent years, he remained one of the few people I trusted. Plus, Hugh had worked with our company in its early days and knew all the financial nuances. Abbott, his voice sounded surprised. I was just about to call you. I heard about what happened. Is it true? It's true, I answered briefly. My own son kicked me out of the company. Hugh whistled. The bloody puppy. I always knew he was a spoiled brat, but I never thought he'd do such a thing. I didn't either. The bitterness flooded me. Can we meet? I need to get out of the house before I start talking to the walls. Sure, buddy. Frank's in an hour? Frank's was an old bar in the business district of Great Falls, where we used to frequent after work when we were younger. Now it was a fancy place with overpriced bar tabs and a claim to vintage, but Hugh still preferred to meet there out of sentimentality. When I walked in, Hugh was already sitting at a corner table with 2 glasses of whiskey. You look lousy, he said instead of greeting me. I feel even worse. I sat down across from him and sipped my whiskey. Thanks for meeting me. Come on, how long have we known each other? Hugh waved his hand. Tell me how he did it. I told him everything. Secret meetings, bribing board members, a fake psychologist, legal tricks. Hugh listened, frowning and occasionally shaking his head. Lousy, he summarized when I was done. But maybe it's for the best. For the best? I couldn't believe my ears. How could losing the company be for the best? The company's in debt up to its eyeballs, Abbott. Hugh leaned closer. You know that better than anyone. Maybe we should let Terrence handle the shit. You're free to start a new life. At 73? I grinned bitterly. What new life? Travel? Write your memoirs, take up your hobbies, Hugh suggested. You've always wanted to learn to play the saxophone. Or the piano? The saxophone? I remembered how Veronica had given it to me for my 60th birthday and how it had gathered dust in the corner of the living room all those years ago. But that's not the point. The company isn't just a business. It's Veronica and I's brainchild, our legacy, and Terrence is going to destroy it. He already is, Hugh nodded. That's why I wanted to contact you. I've been hearing rumors. What kind of rumors? Terrence is laying off old employees. Patrick Wallace has already left. Maria Cortez is on the verge. He's recruiting a new team, young, ambitious, with minimal experience but big demands. I clenched my glass so hard my knuckles turned white. Patrick has been with us for 25 years. He knows every cog in the production process. Doesn't matter now. Hugh took a sip of whiskey. Terrence is reshaping the company to suit himself. But that's not all. What else? The creditors are getting nervous. Patterson's bank is demanding early repayment. Suppliers are cutting back on payment terms. Rumors of a management change have spread, and no one's sure Terrence can keep the company afloat. Patterson's demanding early repayment? I couldn't believe it. But we have a 3-year contract with fixed payments. We had, Hugh corrected. Terrence had signed a new agreement with modified terms. Higher interest, shorter term, and the ability to request early repayment under certain circumstances. What circumstances? A change in the management of the company, for example. Hugh shook his head. I don't know how Ben Pryor let that happen. He's an experienced lawyer. He should have realized the consequences. Ben's on Terrence's side, I reminded him. He probably thought it was just a temporary problem, that Terrence could handle it. I'm not sure even you could handle what's going on right now, Abbott. Hugh was brutally honest. The market for laboratory furniture is shrinking. Pandemic has changed the way labs are furnished. Many are switching to modular solutions from large multinational corporations. It's hard for small companies like yours to compete. I know, I really did. In the last few years, it's been harder and harder to keep the company afloat. But I tried to adapt, find new niches, keep what worked. Terrence would destroy it all in one fell swoop. Maybe, Hugh finished his whiskey, but that's not your concern anymore, is it? I didn't answer. Of course it's still my concern. Even taken, stolen, the company was still mine. In my heart, in my thoughts, in the very core of my being. What are you going to do? Hugh asked after a pause. Fight? I don't know, I answered honestly. Part of me wants to sue, to take back control, to punish Terrence for betraying me. The other part, just tired. I understand, Hugh nodded. Either way, know that you're not alone. I'm always on your side. We sat in the bar for a couple more hours, remembering old times, our youth, Veronica in the early years of our marriage. Beautiful, energetic, full of plans and ideas. We talked about everything but the present. The past was safer, more reliable. There was still happiness there. I woke up the next day with a heavy head and determination in my heart. I couldn't just sit at home and do nothing. I needed to at least know what was going on with the company. Maybe it wasn't too late to fix something. I called Maria Cortez, our now there chief accountant. She didn't pick up. I tried Patrick Wallace, and the answering machine said he was unavailable. Finally, I decided to call William Thorpe. He answered after the third ring, in a quiet and uncertain voice. Mr. Fielding, this is not a very good time to talk. Are you at work? Yes, but he hesitated. Terrence has banned everyone from contacting you, said he'd fire anyone found to be in contact. I see. My worst fears were confirmed. Terrence isolated me, cut off all ties to the company. I'm not going to set you up, William. Just tell me, how's it going? There was a long pause. Finally, Thorpe said quietly, Bad, Mr. Fielding. Very bad. And hung up. I decided to take a chance. I changed into my best suit and went to the company's offices, just as a visitor, with no intention of making a scene. I wanted to see for myself what was going on in the place that had been my second home for almost half a century. The guard at the entrance, Harold, who'd been with the company for 20 years, averted his eyes awkwardly as I approached the counter. Mr. Fielding, I'm sorry, but I can't let you in. It's a directive from the new management. I understand, Harold. I tried to speak calmly, though my insides were seething with humiliation. Can you at least tell me who's in the office right now? Is Terrence here? Yes, sir. He and Mrs. Sherilyn are in his office. They're interviewing new employees, and there are representatives from the bank, Mr. Patterson and two others. They look serious. Thank you, Harold, I nodded. You're a good man. I walked out of the building and sat on a bench in the small park across the street. From there I could see my, now Terrence's, office on the third floor. The curtains were open and I could make out the figures inside. Terrence was pacing from corner to corner, gesticulating vigorously. Sherilyn was sitting at my desk, leaning back in her chair with the look of a hostess. Across from her sat three men in smart suits, bankers. Even from afar, it was obvious that the meeting was tense. I sat like that for about an hour, watching the pantomime in the window. Finally, the bankers got up and headed for the exit. Judging by their faces and gait, the meeting had not gone well. I waited until they were out of the building and headed toward them. Alan, I called out to Patterson, an old acquaintance who was now the head of his father's bank. Can I talk to you for a minute? Patterson stopped, clearly surprised to see me. His colleagues exchanged glances and tactfully stepped aside. Abbott, he extended his hand for a shake. I didn't expect to see you here. I'm an outsider in my own company now. I couldn't hide the bitterness in my voice. How was your meeting with my son? Patterson gloomed. I can't discuss details, you know, client confidentiality and all that. I still own 5% of the company, I reminded him. Technically, I have a right to know. Technically, maybe you do, Patterson sighed. But Terrence asked me not to discuss company business with you. Said you were not in the best of health. And you believed him. It wasn't a question. Abbott, we've known each other 30 years. Patterson lowered his voice. I don't want to interfere in your family affairs. But as a banker, I am concerned. Very concerned. Terrence doesn't realize what he's gotten himself into, I said. The company is in a difficult position. I told him, but he wouldn't listen. He's starting to now. Patterson glanced at the office building. We demand early repayment of the loan. He can't provide it. Offers unrealistic restructuring plans. His wife? He wrinkled his nose. She's trying to get emotional, talking about the bank's social responsibility, about supporting local businesses. But you won't give in. I almost smiled, imagining Sherilyn trying to manipulate Patterson, who was known for being tough on financial matters. Business is business, he shrugged. The bank can't risk depositors' money because of family drama. We gave him a week to find alternative financing or provide a realistic repayment plan. After that, he didn't finish the sentence, but I understood. After that, the bank could start bankruptcy proceedings, foreclosure proceedings, all the things I've been dreading all these years and protecting the company from at great cost. I'm sorry, Abbott, Patterson added. I really am. My father always said you were one of the bank's most reliable customers. Despite the difficulties, you always found a way to honor your commitments. Thank you, Alan, I nodded. Have a good day. I returned to the park bench, watching Patterson and his colleagues leave. The figures flashed through the office window again. Terrence was now sitting at his desk with his arms around his head. Sherilyn stood beside him, saying something emotionally, waving her arms. Even from a distance, it was obvious they were arguing. For the first time since the coup, I felt a strange satisfaction. Not joy, no, I couldn't be happy about the problems of the company I'd spent a lifetime building, but a kind of grim confirmation that I was right. I'd warned Terrence that he had no idea what he was getting into. Now he was beginning to understand. I walked by the office a few more times that day, watching what was going on. I saw Terrence, his face red with anger, yelling at someone in the hallway. I saw the employees gathered in groups, talking worriedly. I saw Sherilyn leave the building in tears, slamming her car door loudly. The company was falling apart before my eyes. And my son, who had been so eager to gain control, now didn't know what to do with that control. I spent the next few days gathering information. I called old customers on the pretense of personal contact, met with vendors we were friendly with, and had lunch with former employees who had been fired by Terrence. The picture was bleak. Terrence had canceled a project for Birch's Lab, the company's largest contract, in favor of his idea for sustainable furniture, which required a significant investment in development and certification. Birch, offended by this treatment, moved on to a competitor, taking several other clients with him. Sherilyn, with no business experience whatsoever, actively intervened in management, insisting on fresh eyes and an intuitive approach. Her intuition led to several disastrously bad decisions, including an expensive advertising campaign that didn't bring in a single new client. Most importantly, none of them addressed the company's real financial problems. Debts were mounting, creditors were demanding payment, suppliers were refusing to work without prepayment. The company was rapidly approaching collapse. On the 7th day after the coup, I got a call from Hugh Brightman. Abbott, are you sitting down? His voice sounded worried. What's wrong? I just heard from my source at the bank. Patterson gave Terrence a final ultimatum. Either he pays the $2 million by the end of the week or the bank starts foreclosure proceedings. $2 million? I couldn't believe my ears. The company doesn't have that kind of money. Exactly, Hugh sighed. Terrence is in a panic. He's been going around to investors, offering a stake in the company for a quick investment, but no one's taking it. Everyone knows the state of the business. What's he going to do? I have no idea, Hugh replied. But if nothing changes, in 10 days your company will be gone. It'll go under the hammer in pieces. The real estate, the equipment, the customer base, everything you've spent 40 years building. I sat in my chair, looking at Veronica's picture on the wall and thinking about her words. Don't let Terrence destroy what we've built. I'd made a promise, and I think I'd already broken it. The phone rang again. Terrence's number popped up on the screen. For the first time in a week, he'd decided to contact me. I knew why. I knew I'd hear panic, fear, maybe even remorse in his voice. He wasn't calling like a son to his father, like a drowning man grasping at straws. My finger hovered over the answer button. Part of me wanted to answer, to listen to his pleas for help, to savor his humiliation. The other part of me just wanted it all to be over, for the company and Terrence and all the problems associated with them to disappear from my life. The phone kept ringing, and I sat motionless, unable to make a decision. 10 days. That's all it took for Terrence to turn a shaky but functioning enterprise into ruins. 10 days of inept management, arrogant decisions, and a complete disregard for financial realities. I watched the company's agony from afar. I didn't answer Terrence's calls, and there were many of them, more persistent each day. I ignored messages that began with accusations. You set me up on purpose, progressed to excuses, you didn't explain how serious this was, and ended with timid requests for a meeting. We need to talk, Dad, for the sake of the company. Hugh kept me in the loop. Patterson didn't back down from his ultimatum. $2 million by the end of the week, or the bank would start foreclosure proceedings. Terrence didn't have that kind of money, and no one wanted to invest in a company on the verge of collapse. In desperation, he made another disastrous decision: to sell at a discount a nearly completed shipment of lab furniture to a major client. This provided an instant cash inflow, but ruined the relationship with the client who was counting on this shipment and jeopardized other contracts. Sherilyn, according to Hugh, went from a confident socialite to a nervous, hysterical woman. She yelled at employees, changed decisions several times a day, and blamed everyone around her for the company's problems. Everyone but herself and Terrence was to blame for the impending disaster. Employees are fleeing like rats from a sinking ship, Hugh told me during our next phone conversation. The ones Terrence hasn't fired yet are quitting on their own. No one wants to be associated with this debacle. And Ben Pryor? I asked, remembering the lawyer who helped Terrence carry out the coup. Is he still with them? He resigned 3 days ago, Hugh chuckled. Said he couldn't represent the company in the current situation. Professional ethics and all that. Really just a rat leaving the ship like everyone else. Who's running the processes now? I asked, knowing that there were hardly any experienced managers left in the company. No one, Hugh answered bluntly. It's a free fall, Abbott. Terrence vacillates between panic and denial. Sherilyn is crying or threatening lawsuits against everyone. The new team they hired has no idea how the business works. This is the end. I listened and felt a strange mix of emotions. Bitterness that the company Veronica and I had built from nothing was turning to rubble. Anger at Terrence, whose arrogance and greed had led to this. And deep inside, I'm ashamed to admit, satisfaction. A grim, angry satisfaction that my warnings had proved prophetic, that Terrence had gotten what he deserved for his betrayal. What are you going to do? Hugh asked. Terrence will surely come to you for help. You're his last chance. I know. I looked out the window at my neglected garden, which Veronica had once kept in perfect condition. We'll see how he does. We didn't have to wait long. That same evening the doorbell rang. Insistent, long. I was in no hurry to open it. Let him wait on the doorstep, suffer the unknown, feel like a beggar. A petty revenge, but it seemed sweet at the time. When I finally opened the door, Terrence was standing in front of me, his hair disheveled, his eyes puffy and uncomfortable. His once perfect suit was wrinkled, his tie askew. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. Maybe he hadn't. Dad, his voice shook. We need to talk. I stepped aside silently, letting him into the house. He walked into the living room, stopping in the middle of the room, unsure if he could sit down uninvited. He'd never thought about it before, just plopped down on the couch, put his feet up on the coffee table, felt like he owned the place. Now he stood there like a delinquent schoolboy in front of the principal. Sit down, I pointed to the chair opposite mine. Will you have a drink? Whiskey if you have it. He sat down, rubbing his hands together nervously. A double. I poured us both a drink, handed him the glass. His fingers trembled slightly as he took it. Mine remained firm, despite age and fatigue. He noticed this, and something akin to shame flashed in his eyes. Well, I sat across from him, looking into his eyes. I'm listening. You were right, were words I hadn't expected to hear from Terrence. The company is in debt, Big debts. I know, I replied calmly. I warned you. But you didn't tell me how bad it was. There was an accusatory note in his voice. 2 million in debt to Patterson's bank, 500,000 in late payments to suppliers, tax problems from last year, contracts we can't fulfill for lack of materials. It's, it's a disaster. I sipped the whiskey, savoring its flavor in the moment. It was a rare occasion when Terrence would admit he was wrong. Although, of course, he did so with reservations. Supposedly, I hadn't warned him enough. Typical. It was all in the files you had access to when you kicked me out of the company, I said. You just didn't bother to read them, or didn't understand what it said. Terrence flared with anger, but he quickly pulled himself together. He knew he was in no position to be outraged. Look, Dad, I know you're angry. You have a right to be. What we did, it was wrong. We? I raised an eyebrow. Me? He lowered his eyes. The way I acted, it was my idea. Not true, I shook my head. It was Sherilyn's idea. You've never been very proactive, Terrence. Always going with the flow, always looking for the easy way out. A corporate coup is too complicated an operation for you. But quite in your wife's vein, he didn't deny it. Instead, he took a swig of whiskey and held out a glass for more. I poured another. It doesn't matter whose idea it was, he said finally. What matters is what's happening now. The company is on the verge of bankruptcy. If we don't find the 2 million by the end of the week, Patterson will start foreclosure proceedings. We'll lose everything. You will lose, I corrected. I already have. 10 days ago, when you kicked me out of the company I created. Dad, please, he said, a pleading tone in his voice. This isn't just about the company. It's our family legacy. Something you and Mom spent a lifetime building. Are you really going to let that disappear? Mentioning Veronica was a low blow. He knew just what to push. Don't you dare talk about your mother. My voice turned icy. Not after you ignored her at the hospital. Not after you stole the company a week after her funeral. Not after you gave her jewelry to Sherilyn while her body was still cold. Terrence turned pale. I loved Mom, he said quietly. Not like she loved you. I turned away, unable to look at him. She always protected you. Even when you stole her jewelry as a kid. Even when you failed college and came home in debt. Even when you traded one meaningless job for another because you couldn't last more than 3 months anywhere. She always said, he'll change, Abbott. Just give him time. Dad. And you know what I always said? I turned to him, looking him straight in the eye. That some people never change. That selfishness and laziness aren't phases of growing up, but character traits. That you'll always be like that. A taker, but not a giver. Wanting results without effort. Demanding respect without earning it. Terrence was silent, staring at the floor. Perhaps for the first time in his life, he was hearing the truth about himself. But Veronica believed in you, I continued quietly. Believed in you to the very end. On her deathbed, she asked me to protect the company from you. Not because she hated you, because I knew you weren't ready. You were never ready. I can change. His voice was barely audible. I'm already changing. These days, they've taught me a lot. Fear of bankruptcy is a bad teacher. I shook my head. It teaches you to avoid the consequences, not to fix the causes. We sat in silence for a while. It was starting to rain outside the window, a fine, dreary fall rain. Drops tapped on the glass, as if counting down the seconds until the inevitable collapse. What do you want from me, Terrence? I asked at last. Why are you here? He looked up and there was hope in his eyes. Help us, Dad. Come back to the company. Take over. You know how to talk to banks, suppliers, customers. They trust you. If you come back, we can save the company. We? I raised my eyebrow again. Or me? You, he gave up. You'll save the company. Yeah, I'll step aside. I'll do whatever you say. And Sherilyn? He hesitated. Of course Sherilyn wasn't going to step aside. She must have sent him to me with this plan to bring me back into the company, to use my experience and connections to save the day. And then, when the danger had passed, they'd throw me out again, more prepared. Sherilyn understands the gravity of the situation, he said finally. She's willing to do whatever it takes to save the company. Really? I didn't hide my skepticism. Addie, where is she now? Why didn't she come with you? She, he hesitated. She's in the office, trying to calm the employees down. A lot of them are about to quit. Some are demanding immediate paychecks, fearing the company will go bankrupt before the end of the month. And they're right, I nodded. Without the 2 million, the company won't survive the week, and you don't know where to get it. I've been thinking about selling real estate, Terrence said quickly, as if he were rehearsing the speech. The office building in downtown Great Falls is worth over 3 million. If we sold it and moved to a less upscale neighborhood, we could pay off the bank and still have enough left over for operating expenses. And who would buy a $3 million building in 3 days? I shook my head. Even if there is a buyer, he'll offer half as much, knowing you're desperate. Then, a partial sale of the company? Bringing in an investor? Who would want to invest in a company on the verge of bankruptcy with incompetent management and a ruined reputation? I was ruthless. You've already approached every potential investor in Great Falls. All of them turned you down, right? Terrence nodded, giving up. Right, he lowered his head. No one wants to get involved with us now. That's why you came to me, I finished for him, as a last chance. Not because you realize your mistakes, not because you're regretting your betrayal. It's because there's nowhere else to go. That's not the only reason, he tried to defend himself. I do regret what happened. I should have listened to you. I should have realized that running a company isn't just about sitting in a nice office and giving orders. But you didn't. I stood up and walked to the window. And now you're paying for your ignorance. Or rather, the company is paying the price. Employees who will lose their jobs. Customers who won't get their orders. Suppliers who don't get paid. Dad, he sounded desperate. I know you're angry. You have a right to be. But don't let your resentment toward me destroy the company. For Mom's sake, she wouldn't want that. Veronica again. More pressure on the sorest spot. Your mother didn't want much, I said quietly. Didn't want to get cancer. Didn't want to die at 68. Didn't want her son to grow up to be a selfish manipulator. But all of those things had happened. I turned to him. Okay, Terrence, I'll help you. But on my terms. His face brightened. He jumped up from his chair, ready to hug me, to thank me. I stopped him with a gesture. Not now. I need to think about what I can do, and what the price of my help would be. Anything, Dad. He was ready to promise the moon from the sky at that moment. You'll be president again. All the stock will come back to you. I'll quit the company if you want me to. We'll talk about it tomorrow. I headed for the door, signaling that the conversation was over. Come with Sherilyn. I want to see both of you when I voice my terms. Sure, he followed me, clearly unwilling to leave without more concrete promises. What time? 10 o'clock in the morning. I opened the door. The rain had picked up and Terrence grimaced, realizing he was going to get wet. And Terrence, yes? Don't think I'm doing this for you, I said bluntly. I'm doing it for Veronica, for the people who work at the company, for the legacy we've built, but not for you. He nodded, accepting that. Right now, he was willing to accept any conditions, any humiliation. The fear of bankruptcy and public shame was stronger than pride. I understand, Dad. Thank you. When he left, I went back into the living room and poured myself another whiskey. The situation was worse than I'd anticipated. 2 million by the end of the week was an impossible task. Even if I sold my house, my personal savings, and used every possible connection, it was unlikely I could raise that much in 3 days. But Terrence and Sherilyn didn't know that. They thought I was a wizard who could solve any problem because they had seen me handle crises for years. What they didn't realize was the effort, the strategic planning it required. What sleepless nights, what compromises, what cunning. I decided to meet with them tomorrow not because I was planning to save the company. I wanted to see their faces when they realized the depth of their failure. I wanted to hear their pleas, their promises, their remorse. I wanted to savor the moment when Sherilyn, that arrogant schemer, would be forced to ask for my help, admitting defeat. Petty? Maybe. But after all they'd done, I deserved that moment of grim satisfaction. The phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. Terrence's number. Again. What else did he want? Couldn't he wait until tomorrow? I didn't answer. letting the call go to voicemail. Let him suffer the unknown. Let him spend a sleepless night thinking about the consequences of his actions. Let him feel a fraction of the despair I felt when he betrayed me. The phone rang again, this time Sherilyn's number. They were clearly panicking, unable to wait until morning. Perhaps there was a new problem. Maybe Patterson had accelerated the ultimatum deadline. Perhaps the staff had rioted. I hesitated. Part of me wanted to continue the game of silence, make them suffer even more. But the other part, the part that still cared about the company, about the people who worked there, pushed to answer. My finger hovered over the answer button. The decision I made now would determine not only the fate of the company, but also my relationship with my son for the rest of my life. The morning was unexpectedly clear. The sun was shining through the curtains, creating fanciful patterns on the living room floor. I'd been up all night, thinking about the upcoming meeting, going over possible scenarios in my head. Part of me wanted to forgive Terrence, to help, to save the company for Veronica's memory, for the employees, for the legacy. The other part, the darker, more vengeful part, wanted to see him lose everything, pay for his betrayal. I decided to let the conversation run its course, making no decision beforehand. Let Terrence and Sherilyn show how sincere they were in their remorse. Let them prove they were worthy of a second chance. At exactly 10 o'clock, the doorbell rang. Not earlier, not later. Apparently, they were waiting in the car, afraid of being late or arriving too early. I didn't hurry to open the door. Let them be nervous a little longer. When I finally opened the door, Terrence and Sherilyn were standing in front of me. Both looked exhausted, with sleep-deprived eyes and pale faces. Sherilyn, usually flawless, with perfect makeup and styling, was now almost makeup-free, her hair hastily gathered into a sloppy bun. Terrence looked even worse than yesterday, wrinkled, unshaven, his hands shaking. "Come in." I stepped aside, letting them into the house. They walked into the living room, exchanging nervous glances. Terrence remembered yesterday's conversation, but Sherilyn obviously didn't know what to expect. They sat side by side on the couch, like schoolchildren in front of the principal. I took the chair opposite, offering neither coffee nor water. Let it be a business meeting, no pretenses of politeness. "So," I began, looking at them. "Terrence told me about the situation. $2 million in debt to Patterson's bank by the end of the week, or else bankruptcy proceedings. Overdue payments to suppliers. Tax problems. Mass layoffs. Isn't that right?" "It's worse." Sherilyn spoke first, and I noticed the change in her tone. No arrogant confidence, no condescension toward the old man. Just panic and despair. "Last night, 3 of our biggest customers had their contracts canceled. Officially because of delivery delays, but in reality, everyone knows the company's on the verge of collapse. No one wants to deal with a sinking ship." "I see," I nodded. "What about the staff?" "Half of them have already quit." Terrence ran his hand over his face. "The rest are demanding immediate payment of all wage debts and compensation. They're threatening to sue." "How much do you owe them?" "About $300,000. Sherilyn lowered her eyes. "We've been, delayed payments for the last 2 weeks to pay the vendors' bills. We thought it was temporary. But now you have no money for payroll, no suppliers, no customers." I summarized. "An impressive result in 10 days of management. Congratulations." Sherilyn flared up, but held back. This was no time to be proud. "We made mistakes," she said quietly. "We didn't realize how serious this was. We thought we could attract new investment quickly, launch new product lines." "You thought running a company was fun and easy," I interrupted. "A nice office, power, prestige, no sleepless nights over financial reports, no agonizing over who to pay first and who to ask to wait, no balancing on the edge of survival day after day, year after year." They didn't say a word. What can I say to that? I was right, and they knew it. "But you didn't come here to hear me lecture," I continued. "You came to ask for help. The question is, why should I help you?" Terrence and Sherilyn looked at each other. Obviously, they had been discussing the matter before the meeting, preparing their arguments. "We're going to give you back control of the company," Terrence began. "Total control. All the shares. All the powers. We'll sign whatever documents you want. And in return? In return, you save the company. Sherilyn tried to sound businesslike, but her voice shook. You find the money to pay off the bank. You rebuild relationships with customers and suppliers. Stabilize the situation. And you? I looked at them carefully. Shoninawaram, what is your role in this plan? Again, we exchanged glances. Terrence coughed. I can leave the company if that's what you want, or stay in any position you see fit. Even cleaning toilets? I couldn't resist being sarcastic. Terrence blushed but nodded. If it's necessary to save the company, yes, in any position. What about you, Sherilyn? I turned my gaze to my sister-in-law. What role do you see for yourself? I've never officially worked for the company, she shrugged. But if you think I could be useful, I think you've both been useful enough. I didn't hide my bitterness. But that's not the point. The point is that you don't know what you're asking for. $2 million by the end of the week is not a sum I can pull out from under my mattress. Even if I sold this house, my car, my savings, it wouldn't be enough. But you have connections, Sherilyn insisted. You know everyone in Great Falls. The banks trust you. Customers respect you. Trust and respect take years to earn. I shook my head. And they're lost in an instant. Now, after everything that's happened, my connections aren't going to help. Everyone knows I've been kicked out of my own company. They know my son betrayed me. What bank would want to lend money under these circumstances? They were silent, realizing the truth of my words. I continued. But even assuming that by some miracle I find the $2 million, even if I save the company from immediate bankruptcy, what then? I spend the remaining years of my life paying off debts, rebuilding my reputation, rebuilding what you destroyed. And you, what? Stand by and wait for the company to become profitable again so you can do the same trick again? No, Dad. Terrence looked genuinely upset. We'll never again. Don't make promises you can't keep, I cut him off. You already betrayed me once. You'll betray me again if you get the chance. It's in your nature. It's not fair, Sherilyn interjected. Terrence realized his mistakes. We both have. We just want to make things right. You want to avoid the consequences. I looked her straight in the eye. That's not the same as realizing mistakes. I stood up, walked to the window. The sun had already risen high, illuminating the garden. Veronica had planted roses there years ago. Now they were overgrown, feral without her caring hands. But they still bloomed, stubborn and proud. You know what the saddest thing is? I said without turning around. That you don't even realize what you've lost. All you saw was money, power, status. But a company is so much more than that. It's relationships, it's trust, it's traditions passed down from generation to generation. It's what Veronica and I have spent our entire lives building, investing not only money, but our souls. I turned to them. Do you know why the company is in debt? Why the last 3 years have been especially hard? Because cancer treatment costs a fortune. Experimental techniques, top doctors, drugs that insurance doesn't cover. It all cost millions. And we paid it without hesitation. Because Veronica's life was priceless. Terrence looked shocked. Yeah, I didn't know. Of course you didn't know. I didn't sound reproachful, just matter of fact. You never asked. You never inquired about her treatment, her condition. You came to the hospital once a week, sat there for 15 minutes and ran away on your important business. And I made loans, sold assets, did everything I could to give her a chance. Why didn't you tell me? There were tears in Terrence's eyes. I would have helped. With what? I grinned. With my participation in a charity golf tournament? Or another pointless idea for a company that requires $1 million investment with no guarantee of return? You've never been an enabler, Terrence. Just a burden. Sherilyn put her hand on her husband's shoulder, as if to protect him from my words. But what I saw in her eyes was not resentment, but fear. Fear of a future that now seemed inevitable. What are you going to do, Abbott? She asked quietly. Are you going to let the company go bankrupt? What would Veronica do? I asked a counter question. If she were here, if she saw what you'd done to her legacy, what would she say? They didn't say anything. Both knew the answer. She would say that some lessons should be learned through experience. I continued, that sometimes you have to let people reap the rewards of their mistakes. that it's the only way for them to grow. You refuse to help, Terrence stated. Not a question, a statement. I refuse to save you from the consequences of your actions, I clarified. The company is another matter. I can advise you on how to minimize the damage, how to conduct the bankruptcy procedure with the least losses for employees, customers, suppliers, how to keep at least part of the business, perhaps under a different name, with a different structure. But not 2 million by the end of the week. Sherilyn looked devastated. No, I shook my head. I can't give that. And I wouldn't, even if I could. Some things can't be bought. Trust, respect, integrity, all of which you have yet to learn. And maybe bankruptcy isn't the worst teacher. We sat in silence for a while. Terrence looked broken. Sherilyn looked devastated. I, on the other hand, felt strangely relieved. It was as if the weight I'd been carrying all these years, the company, the responsibility for the employees, protecting Terrence from the consequences of his mistakes, had finally fallen from my shoulders. What's going to happen to you? Terrence finally asked. After all this? I'm leaving, I answered simply. Hugh Brightman invited me to move to his place on the coast. He has a little house there overlooking the ocean. I've always wanted to live by the water. You're going away? Terrence looked genuinely surprised. For good? Maybe, I shrugged. At my age, it's hard to make long-term plans. But yes, I'm selling the house. Too many memories. Too many ghosts. What about us? He sounded like a child being abandoned. What's going to happen to us? You're adults, Terrence, I said softer than before. Not out of pity, out of humility. It's up to you to decide what happens next. Maybe this bankruptcy will be the beginning of something new for you. Maybe you'll finally find something you're really good at. Something that's your own, not stolen from others. We could, visit you? Terrence looked at me with hope. A faint, uncertain hope, but hope nonetheless. I wondered. Part of me wanted to cut all ties, to put the past behind me, to start a new life without toxic relationships. But the other part, the part that still remembered Terrence as a little boy, his first steps, his laughter, couldn't close the door completely. Maybe, I said finally, in time, when the wounds have healed a little, when you both really understand what you've lost and why. It wasn't forgiveness, more like a door left ajar, a tiny possibility that one day, in the distant future, we could speak to each other again, without bitterness or recrimination. Thank you, Terrence nodded, accepting the condition. For not slamming the door completely shut. Don't thank me. I looked at the picture of Veronica on the wall. Thank your mother. She always believed there was good in you. Deep, deep down inside. They stood up, realizing the conversation was over. The meeting had been shorter than they'd expected, and it hadn't ended the way they'd hoped. But there was a certainty in it, a clarity they had missed for the past few days. What do we do now? Sherilyn asked practically. With the company? With the debts? Call Alan Patterson. I walked them to the door. Tell him you're planning a voluntary bankruptcy. Ask for a meeting to discuss the terms. He's a tough businessman, but he's not without humanity. If you're honest and open, he may offer more lenient liquidation terms. And the employees? Terrence looked worried. What do we do with them? Gather everyone. I opened the door. Explain the situation. No lies, no sugarcoating. Tell them you'll do everything you can to pay their back wages, even if it takes time, and help them find a new job with references, contacts. That's the minimum you can do. They nodded, accepting the advice. On the threshold, Terrence turned around, as if he wanted to say something, but couldn't find the words. I understood. Sometimes a goodbye is just a goodbye. No big words or dramatic gestures. Good luck, I said simply. You too, Dad, he replied quietly. I closed the door and went back into the living room. Sitting down in my chair, I looked at Veronica's picture. For the first time in a long time, I felt something like peace. That's it, darling, I said out loud, as if she could hear. The company probably won't survive. Our legacy will be gone. But you know what? That doesn't matter anymore. What matters is that I'm finally free. From the company, from responsibility, from Terrence and his constant disappointments. Free to start something new, even at 73. I pulled out my cell phone, Dialed Hugh's number. "Hello, old boy," I said when he answered. "Is your offer to move to the coast still on the table?" "Sure," I could hear the surprise in his voice. "What's wrong?" "Just decided it was time to move on," I replied as I looked out the window at Veronica's roses. "Start a new chapter, one without toxic relationships and painful memories." "And the company?" Hugh asked cautiously. "Let Terrence and Sherilyn deal with the consequences of their actions." I felt the heaviness in my chest lessen with each word. I had done all I could. Now my time was my own. I hung up the phone and looked at the pictures hanging on the walls. The story of a lifetime. The wedding, Terrence's birth, starting a company, anniversaries, holidays, traveling. So many memories, so many stories. But it's time to put them behind me and move forward. Tomorrow I'll start packing. Some clothes, a few books, a picture of Veronica. Just the essentials. The rest I'll sell with the house or give to charity. In my new life, I don't need old things filled with the past. The coast, the ocean, a little house overlooking the water. New people, new places, new opportunities. Maybe I'll finally learn to play the saxophone, or start writing my memoirs, or just sit on the veranda, watch the waves and enjoy the peace that has eluded me for so long. Without the toxic family, without betrayal, no bitterness. Just me, my memories of Veronica, and the remaining years that I will live the way I want to live. Free, free at last.